Wayne. Tell us the Wayne Clark story.
All right. Well, it's quite a few years to go through, but I won't go all the way back to 6 months old. But thanks, Michael. Thanks for inviting me on. So pretty much, a lot of people know me, but they might not know a lot about my background. So I started life in a family that was actually involved in the building industry. My dad was a diesel mechanic when I was very, very young, and he owned a garage, I think Caxton Motors from memory was what it was called, in Brisbane. But then he did some additional study and finished up with some qualifications, and had a natural disposition for anything to do with engineering or things that, how do things work. But he anyway started building some wrought iron handrails under his house. He bought himself a welder, and so he made a set of wrought iron handrails, steel handrails, for our patio, and some gates and a few other bits and pieces. And a lot of people liked them and asked him where he got them from, and he said he made them, and they asked him whether he could make them some. So he started doing that under the house, but then it eventually led to him starting a business. That original business was called Clark and Farmer, and they specialised in wrought iron sort of handrails and step stringers and those sorts of things. Anyway, moving forward, he developed into a structural engineering business, and they started a company called, my father and mother started a company called Australian Fabricated Industries, which was one of the reasonably big players in the industry back in the 60s and early 70s. Did a lot of work around Brisbane in the early phase of the high-rise buildings going up, and I know that when Dad would have guests come up and stay with us, he always took them around and showed them all the jobs he'd done. And we were usually in the car being bored stiff by the same story over and over and over. But anyway, so that business ticked on. I worked for it for a few years. And strangely enough, one of our biggest clients was a company called KD Morris.
Oh, yeah.
That was in Montague Road, just down from the QBCC head office. It went belly up in the early 1970s, and it turned out to be the longest company wind-up in the company wind-up history.
Didn't you just say
years to wind it up?
It was just recently completed, was that right? Is that you told me the other day?
Not that many years ago, yeah. It took 18 years, so... so that really hurt Dad, and that caused the demise of Australian Fabricated Industries. So that business went into liquidation, and he had another business that he kept working in for a number of years, and he continued to work until he, into his 80s really, from home. So yeah, it's a bit ironic that, or strange that I finish up in this industry, looking after making sure that people don't get caught. So my background, I've had a number of clerical jobs in my early days, which led to management roles. I've worked as a bursar in a private school, a well-known private school in Brisbane. I was also the residential manager of a College of Advanced Education campus in Goulburn in New South Wales. And I came into the building industry again in the early 1990s, and was a credit manager there for about 9 years with a couple of companies. Then I started my own consultancy business in 2001, which is still running as a part-time thing. But I took over, was offered the opportunity to take over as the executive director of BICB in 2012, and that's where I currently am, obviously.